Love and anxiety feel like opposites. One is warm, one is cold. One pulls you forward, the other freezes you in place. And yet, these two emotions are almost always found in the exact same spot, right next to the people closest to you. A stranger on the street doesn't make your heart race, but the person whose name is in your recent calls, the person you've given your time, your energy, your secrets to? Yeah, that person has the power to absolutely wreck you, and that's not a sign something is broken. That's actually what closeness does. If you don't understand this paradox, you can spend your entire life chasing intimacy while simultaneously being terrified of it. That's what today's video is about. We're going right into the middle of that contradiction. Here's something developmental. Science and psychology have confirmed over and over again. Humans are wired for connection. We don't just want it, we need it. Some research even suggests that social rejection and isolation trigger neural responses that overlap with physical pain. Think about that for a second. Your brain doesn't fully separate "I lost someone I love" from "I'm physically hurting." Loneliness isn't just a feeling, it's a threat signal. It registers in your body like a warning alarm, and this is where it gets wild, because the very thing we need most is also the thing we're most afraid of. We crave deep connection, but the deeper the connection, the more terrified we become of losing it. Here's why. Getting close to someone means giving them access to you, your time, your energy, your emotional world, and eventually, your weaknesses. In the early stages of a relationship, you share surface-level stuff, favorite movies, where you grew up, what kind of food you like. But as things deepen, you start to show the parts you never post on social media, the moments you're most ashamed of, the fears you've never said out loud, the version of you that isn't polished or edited or filtered. And the more of that you show someone, the more exposed you become. The closer someone is, the bigger the potential wound. Getting rejected by someone you just met stings. Getting abandoned by someone you've loved for 10 years, that's a different category of pain entirely. Closeness is beautiful, but it's also a risk you take every single day. Now let's add one more layer to this. Expectations. When a relationship is new, just being around each other feels like enough. But over time, expectations quietly grow. You start hoping they'll notice when you're off. You want them there without having to ask. You need them to just know what you need, even when you haven't said it. Expectations themselves aren't the problem, but the bigger they grow, the wider the gap becomes between what you hope for and what actually happens. And when that gap opens up, most people go one of three ways. They stop expecting anything just to protect themselves. They direct all that disappointment outward as anger, or they swallow it whole and say nothing, while the anxiety quietly builds. Now, and this is really important, the anxiety you feel in a close relationship isn't proof that something is wrong with the relationship. It might actually be proof that it matters to you. The things we stand to lose are the things that make us most afraid. And something even more interesting, the anxiety you feel right now, in this relationship, in this moment, it probably didn't start here. Relationship anxiety is often connected to something much older than your current partner. Psychologist John Bowlby introduced a framework for understanding this. He argued that the very first relationship you ever had, the bond with your primary caregiver, as an infant, becomes a kind of internal blueprint for every relationship that follows. This is the foundation of what's called attachment theory, the idea that the emotional patterns formed in your earliest years quietly shape how you connect with people as an adult. Bowlby's work was later expanded by researcher Mary Ainsworth, and the patterns she identified have shown up in study after study ever since. There are three main directions these attachment patterns tend to go. The first is secure attachment. When a caregiver was consistently warm, responsive, and emotionally available, children tended to develop a secure attachment style. Adults with this pattern generally feel comfortable in close relationships. When conflict comes up, they tend to focus on resolving it rather than catastrophizing. They can move between closeness and independence without feeling like the relationship is falling apart. The second is anxious attachment. When a caregiver was unpredictable, sometimes warm and present, other times distant or unavailable, children learn to stay in a constant state of alert. As adults, This can look like constantly needing reassurance from your partner. Are they still into you? Did you say something wrong? Why did it take them 3 hours to text back? One small signal and your brain starts running worst-case scenarios. The need to get close and the fear of losing the relationship end up existing in the same moment, at the same time, pulling in opposite directions. The third pattern is avoidant attachment. When emotional needs were consistently dismissed or ignored, many children learn to shut those needs down entirely. As adults, this can look like getting deeply uncomfortable when things get too intimate. You might want closeness, somewhere deep down, but the moment a relationship starts feeling too real, something in you pulls back. You start needing more space. You put up walls. The closer someone gets, the more you feel like you need distance. Now, and I really want you to hear this, none of these patterns are flaws in your character. In most cases, they're survival strategies. They were adaptations your younger self made to navigate a specific environment. The anxious child learned that constantly seeking attention was the best way to get their needs met. The avoidant child learned that keeping emotions hidden was the best way to avoid the pain of rejection. Those were smart moves at the time. They worked. The problem is, the nervous system doesn't automatically update its software. When you become an adult, even when your current relationship is nothing like what you grew up with, your body and mind can still run those same old programs, the same old fears, the same old defenses. Your present partner gets hit with reactions that were really meant for a past situation they had nothing to do with. And underneath all of this is something deeply connected to how we see ourselves. Self-worth. People who experience frequent relationship anxiety often wrestle with a quiet, persistent question: am I actually someone worth loving? When you're not sure of the answer, you start looking for it in your partner's every move. Did they text back fast enough? Did they say your name in that tone? Were they paying attention when you talked? You use their behavior as a mirror to answer a question you haven't been able to answer for yourself. And here's why that's exhausting for everyone involved. Because no amount of reassurance from another person can permanently fill a gap that lives inside you. The anxiety comes back, the question resurfaces, and this is where the external world steps in and makes everything harder. We live in an era where we are constantly exposed to other people's relationships, and not just any version of those relationships. The highlight reel version, the couple at golden hour, walking hand in hand, the partner who planned a jaw-dropping birthday surprise, the anniversary post that made you tear up because it was so beautifully written. Here's the truth: that's one frame out of thousands. It's the single best photo taken after 30 tries. It's the one magical night surrounded by months of completely ordinary Tuesday evenings and disagreements about whose turn it is to do the dishes. But when you see that image on repeat, your brain starts treating it as average, as the baseline. And then you look at your own relationship, unfiltered, unedited, fully real, and it suddenly feels like it's falling short. Why don't we have moments like that? Why isn't my partner more like theirs? Is something wrong with us? You're comparing your uncut footage to someone else's trailer, and the stories we see in movies and TV don't help. Romantic narratives in media are built around emotional peaks, the fate-driven first meeting, the unbearable conflict, the perfect, tear-soaked reconciliation. But real relationships don't follow that arc. Most of the time, love looks like deciding who texts back first, having a short phone call because you're both exhausted, and slowly learning to live alongside someone else's habits. That's not a relationship that's fading, that's a relationship that's real. But when we hold our everyday moments up against the cinematic version of love, ordinary starts to feel like a warning sign. We interpret the calm as coldness. We read the routine as the beginning of the end. And beyond media, modern life itself creates a tension most of us feel but rarely name. We want to be alone but not lonely. We want to be deeply connected but not vulnerable. We want freedom but we're terrified of being left. We know, logically, that all of those things can't happen at the same time, but logic doesn't run the show when you're in the middle of a feeling. So we end up anxious, both inside the relationship and outside of it. That empty, restless feeling? You're not the only one who's felt it. Now, when anxiety shows up in a relationship, most people's first instinct is to make it stop. reach out more, ask for reassurance, or go the other direction, shut it all down, pull back, end it before it ends you. But rushing to eliminate anxiety often makes it worse. The more you seek reassurance, the more the relief only lasts an hour before the anxiety comes crawling back, and cutting off a relationship impulsively just creates a different kind of anxiety, the kind that echoes in the quiet. The real turning point starts with a shift in how you relate to the anxiety itself. Stop treating it like an enemy you need to destroy. Anxiety is information. It's your emotional system raising its hand and saying, hey, something here matters to you. Maybe it's telling you this relationship is important. Maybe it's pointing to a fear of loss you haven't fully looked at yet. Instead of suppressing it or running from it, start getting curious. What is this feeling actually trying to say? The next step is building self-awareness around your own patterns. When your partner takes a few hours to respond and your stomach drops, is that about them, or is it about someone from a long time ago who didn't show up when you needed them? Is the fear coming from what's happening right now, in this relationship, with this person, or are you reacting to a ghost? This kind of distinction isn't easy. It takes practice. It takes honest self-observation. But when you can start to make that separation, conflicts become much easier to navigate. You stop projecting old wounds onto new situations. Alongside all of this, healthy boundaries matter more than most people realize. And I want to be clear about what a boundary actually is. It's not a wall. It's not a way to push someone away. A boundary is what allows you to stay present in a relationship without losing yourself inside of it. Being able to say what makes you uncomfortable. Being able to hear the same from your partner. Giving each other room to be separate people while still choosing each other. That's what a boundary does. When boundaries blur completely, relationships start to feel suffocating or overwhelming. When boundaries are there, genuine closeness actually becomes possible. And here's the hardest part, but maybe the most important. You have to make peace with imperfection. There is no perfect relationship. There is no perfect partner. And there is certainly no perfect version of you. Every relationship has misunderstandings. Every relationship has disappointments. Every relationship has moments where someone says the wrong thing, or doesn't show up the way you needed. That's not failure. What actually matters is how you move through those moments together, reaching back out after a fight, keeping the conversation going even when you feel misunderstood, choosing each other, not the perfect version, but the real, complicated, sometimes frustrating version, over and over again. That's what a mature relationship actually looks like. We grow up thinking that a good relationship is one where you never feel anxious, where everything is steady, calm, and safe, where fear just doesn't exist. But that's a misunderstanding of what love actually requires. The closer you get to someone, the more vulnerable you become, and vulnerability brings uncertainty. Uncertainty brings some level of anxiety. Feeling anxious in a relationship doesn't automatically mean the relationship is wrong. Sometimes it just means you're actually in it.
The people who feel the least anxiety in relationships are often the ones who are the least invested. The anxiety you feel? It's proof that this relationship is not nothing to you. So anxiety is not the end of love. Anxiety is often where real love begins to be tested and grows.
Choosing to stay present even after someone has seen your messiest parts. Continuing to show up even when you're not at your best. Reaching out when everything in you wants to retreat. That's how trust is actually built. Not in the perfect moments, in the imperfect ones. And you are not alone in this. The people who look the most confident, the couples who seem the most solid, they carry versions of this too. The desire for connection wrapped around the fear of loss. That contradiction doesn't make you broken, it makes you human. In a world that keeps getting more complicated, completely eliminating relationship anxiety probably isn't the goal. The goal is learning to understand it, to sit with it, to work with it instead of against it.
Because the courage to face anxiety, to stay open, even when it's scary, to choose vulnerability anyway, that might just be the bravest thing we do for the people we love. So if anxiety is what you're feeling right now, in your relationship, in your life, don't run from it. Get curious about it. Because on the other side of that, anxiety is a version of connection most people never let themselves reach. You don't have to be fearless to love someone well. You just have to be brave enough to stay.
In the next video, we'll go deeper into the specific relationship patterns that keep so many people stuck, and what the psychology of behavior actually tells us about how to break free. If that sounds like something you need, hit subscribe. I'll see you there.